Welcome back to the shed. One of the things I really enjoy about reading vintage science fiction is that occasionally you come across that forgotten gem. And that was the case when I did my last book haul video and I came across this novel by Hunt Collins, Tomorrow and Tomorrow. So I wasn't familiar with Hunt Collins, but a little bit of reading and I soon realized that this was a pseudonym for Ed McBain, otherwise known as Evan Hunter, otherwise known as Salvatore Albert Lombino. So he had multitude of different pen names, but he's most often remembered for his crime and mystery novels under the pen name of Ed McBain. He also wrote the screenplay for Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. So after a little bit of reading, I soon wanted to dive into this because I thought this is going to be rather interesting. Let's see what he did when it comes to science fiction. So the novel was first released in 1956 and it tells the story of a distant Earth in the year 2174. And I've got to say, I really like that artist's impression of the future Earth. So the year 2174 is ruled by two different groups of people. One of them is the Vicarians or the Vikes, and the other one is the Realists or the Rees. Now the Vikes are rather interesting because they've done away with clothes, and the little clothing that they do wear is see-through and leaves nothing to the imagination. Now drugs are also legal, and the Vikes are pretty much taken on drugs as their primary pastime. So they have several times during the day where they participate in drug taking, and there's no taboo when it comes to drugs. The other thing interesting about the Vikes is that they don't like to be seen eating. So eating is something that you do in solitude, and it's never a social thing. You're never seen at a restaurant or a bar or anything like that seen to be eaten. But the other strange things about them is that they don't seem to have any sex at all. So there's very little physical touch. So it's sort of weird because on one hand, they're doing all these drugs and there's a whole lot of nudity, but they seem to have these strange customs where they don't eat or they don't have sex or they don't touch each other and they don't live together either, which I found rather interesting. On the other hand, we have the Realists or the Rees. Now they wear very moderate clothing, their dresses are way below the knee, they're wearing three-piece suits and all collared up and they're very much covered. But the interesting things about the Realists is that they seem to participate in very immoral activities behind the scenes. So behind closed doors, they're having orgies and participating in sex and they're getting drunk and drinking a whole lot of alcohol. So it's sort of one face to the public, but a very different face to what happens behind the scenes, which is sort of very hypocritical of them. So when it comes to the characters in the novel, the plot really goes between two main characters. One of them is a Vike. His name is Van Brandt. He happens to be a publicist, a literary publicist for this publishing house, a very big publishing house, where they release paperback novels and videos and movies and television shows, which provide a lot of Vike sort of propaganda. So there's a lot of nudity and a lot of flesh bearing and the Vike way of life. The other main protagonist is this guy called Dino Palazzi, and he's a critic. So he's often criticizing the works that comes out of these publishing houses, basically critiquing them, putting them down, because he is a realist. He's one of these Reeds. So he's trying to shut this movement down as quickly as he possibly can. But there's fear that the movement has gone way too much momentum and there's no slowing this thing down. So the scene is set for a final showdown. We have Van Brandt really trying to monopolize on the momentum that this movement has got going. And on the other hand, we have this Lozina person, this Reese, this critic, who has got a couple of magic cards up his sleeves that is more than willing to pull out and play the last card. So who will ultimately prevail? Will the Vikes movement gain momentum and avalanche into the new way of life? Or will the Realists, the Rees, be able to pull this movement back and have some kind of modesty back on the human race? Or is there a fine line? Is there a middle ground somewhere that will ultimately lead to humanity's going forward? So I found this novel to be a very good read, a very entertaining read at that. I hadn't read anything by Hunt Collins in the past, and I'm now really interested to read one of his mystery or crime novels under the pen name Ed McBain, because I really thoroughly enjoyed the writing in this novel. I thought it had a very good prose, very good pacing, and it had me hooked the whole way through. I thought it was really fantastic. So this novel was written in 1956, and I really did enjoy the view of the future that Hunt Collins put forward in this novel. Now, it was a bit of a satirical piece of work where I think there's a large part of it taking a guess as to where the Beat Generation was going at the time, because there is an element of that and what happened in the 60s during the hippie revolution. It didn't quite get it right, but I still think it stands up as a very good look into the future when it comes to our morals and where our morals come from and where our morals may potentially go. But I think it also plays a part in today's society, and I think also well into the future, because it really does draw those parallels between ultra-conservative and ultra-liberal views in many ways, and it tries to find the balance between the two. And I think it's just as appropriate today to ask those questions as it was in 1956, as I hope it will be in the year 2174. So I really did like the view. So some of it was, stretched, albeit, but I did really enjoy the view of the future that Hunt Collins put forward in this novel. One of the things I really enjoy about reading vintage science fiction is when these authors talk about technology and technology's future. I always like that. I always like the insights. What would someone in the 50s think of in the year 2174? What would it look like? And I like the fact that Hunt's had a go at it a couple of times, and he's come pretty close. He might have been out by 100 years or so, but some of the tech that he uses was pretty bang on. For example, the video conferencing or video calls, face-to-face video calls in real time are a thing of the 2174s, which is, he foresaw that right from the year 1956. And I really enjoyed the way he sort of envisioned that, but I always enjoy when they're almost there with the technology, but they miss that little element that just makes me smile every single time. So for example, they have this video conferencing, video phone calls, but an operator still patches in the calls, which I thought were just cool, just so reminiscent of the times. I love it when I see that in science fiction. They also have a rather interesting tech when it comes to sensor television, they call it. Not something that we quite have today, but who knows, maybe in the year 2174, we will be able to have television shows that we not only be able to see something in 3D, but we may be able to actually feel and smell and have different perceptions of that scene if you're a male or a female, which is some of the tech that happens on in the book here, which I thought was just brilliant. So I really, really enjoyed the tech that came out of this novel. So what didn't I like? Look, there's a whole lot of heavy drug use in this novel, and we're talking heavy drugs, right? Now, I sort of knew that coming in. There's a blurb on the back of the book that sort of prepares you for that. But I honestly wasn't expecting it from a novel that was published in 1956. So the scenes can be rather graphical, and I suspect they may trigger some viewers. So please, be mindful of that if you're willing to have a go at this one. But if you can ever see that, yes, there is a lot of heavy drug use. I wasn't really deterred by it, but it really is quite confrontational and in your face. The other thing that I found odd was the description of the female characters, the Vikes, when he was describing what they were wearing. Now, I understand why he did that. He wanted to really give you the sense of what this culture looks like, the perception of immorality that I had when it came to their dress code. So he was very graphical in what they were not wearing, which I thought was fine the first time round. But I don't know, the second and third time round, it sort of took on a bit of a creepy sort of substance for me. It almost felt like leering at some point in time. And it didn't quite do that equally matched when it come to what the realist or the Rees were wearing. So I thought it was a bit unbalanced, and it felt a bit pervert in my mind for some reason. So look, but that's a minor criticism, because I do understand why he did it, because he really wanted to show you the contrast and the perception of morality when it comes to what they were wearing. So I get it, but yeah, I don't know, I'd love to hear your comments if you read the novel, because yeah, I just thought it was borderline a bit strange at times. So what about recommendations? Look, I thoroughly enjoyed this one, and the obvious recommendation is to any Ed McBain fan out there that is very familiar with his mystery and crime novels, then and you want to get stuck into vintage science fiction, then I reckon this is a great place to start, because not only is it, I think, a good Ed McBain novel, but it stands on its own as a very good vintage science fiction novel, which sort of takes me to the next recommendation. If you're a vintage science fiction fan, as I am, and you're looking to read someone who you haven't read before, then I'd say have a go at Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Hunt Collins, because it really is, I think, a forgotten gem. This was a classic, and it's a shame that not many people know about this one, because I thoroughly enjoyed it. So I ranked this one a 4 out of 5 on Goodreads. It had everything I was looking for in a vintage science fiction novel. So if you like your vintage science fiction and you want to have a go at a lesser known author who that it really is, in my opinion, that hidden gem or forgotten gem, then I think you'll enjoy this one. Hey, I've been Peter. This has been the Sci-Fi Shed, and I'll thank you again, and I'll see you next time in the shed.